In a heated hearing, Mark Harris pressed witnesses on what he called a broken higher education model. His argument? Too many students, especially economically disadvantaged students, are being misled about the real cost and value of certain degree programs. Republicans say new reforms will limit student borrowing and cut off federal funding for programs that fail to produce strong economic outcomes. Critics warned this could reshape higher education in ways that disproportionately impact vulnerable students. Let's break down what's really at stake.
Thank you. I'd like now to recognize my good friend from North Carolina, Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all of you on the panel for your testimonies here and your written testimonies that I enjoyed reading. Dr. Akers, every year, millions of high school seniors face one of the most significant and difficult decisions of their lives: what comes next after graduation. However, these young adults are all too often led astray when deciding on which college they should attend, what field of study to pursue, or even whether college is necessary at all to achieve their career goals. So I want to just ask you up front, in your view, how is today's higher education system failing high school students as they prepare to make these significant life-altering decisions?
I'd say the primary way in which the system is failing students is that we are not delivering on the promise of opportunity. On average, higher education is delivering opportunity in spades, but there are plenty of programs out there that are allowed or have been allowed to continue to receive funding through federal programs that are consistently delivering students not into good economic opportunity. So I would say the variation that we've seen historically, hopefully, which will now be stopped by the implementation of the reconciliation legislation, has been the significant failure for students.
Well, as you noted in your testimony, while a college degree can and often does pay off for many Americans, those outcomes are highly program specific. And for some students, attending college actually leaves them worse off financially than if they had never enrolled. And you also highlighted what you described as an information gap, I noticed, where students enroll without a clear understanding of the true cost of their degree. So how does this information gap impact students' decision making, and who would you say are disproportionately harmed by these misguided and irresponsible policies?
In general, I'd say they're already economically or racially disadvantaged students who are struggling to make the best decisions about college. We've made it really hard for people to make good decisions. The information technically exists. There's a website out there, thecollegescorecard.gov. I go there all the time, but American students, especially young high school students or even returning adults, don't know that this is where the information is that they need to make decisions. Secondly, institutions have made it difficult for students to interpret, or potential students to interpret, the financial aid offers that they give to them in a self-serving manner. We need to make it more clear so that people can make decisions that are in their own best interest.
Well, and I agree. And Congress has a responsibility to hold colleges and universities accountable, which is why in H.R. 1, Republicans placed reasonable limits on how much students can borrow. I will ask you one more. In your expert opinion, how will these reforms not only help rein in rising college costs, but also increase accountability in higher education by ensuring institutions prioritize value over volume when offering degree programs?
For the first time, this legislation puts in place standards that says to an institution, if you are not delivering your graduates, your students, into better economic circumstances than where you started, we do not want you in the federal lending program. That is a tremendous win both for individual students and for taxpayers. Layer on top of that what I think is a really important protection for graduate students. We've struggled to pin down exactly through research the relationship between the availability of credit in student lending programs and prices, but very recently a set of economists were able to pin down very precisely there has been a tremendous increase in cost of graduate professional programs because of the eligibility for credit that has been largely unconstrained. And so this is going to, for the first time, put downward pressure on prices of those programs, which really works to serve students better because they get a better deal, they get those returns at a lower cost, and also protects taxpayers from the downside of having to repay these loans.
I've only got a minute left, and Mr. Landward and Mr. Rodriguez, I will say I was greatly encouraged by the steps your respective states have taken to ensure institutions of higher education remain accountable to both students and taxpayers. So since I only have about 45 seconds left, Mr. Landward, Utah requires public institutions to submit 3-year plans to evaluate your programs and administrative costs. How has this planning requirement changed decision-making at the institutional level, and can you give us any specific examples that of how costs have been reduced?
Thank you for the question. I'll be brief. We do require now institutions to provide a 3-year, what we call a strategic reinvestment plan. And these investment plans were developed through a state law that essentially took $60 million out of the state higher education budget, held it, and then had those institutions tell us in a 3-year plan where would that money come from and cuts and where would it go, based on criteria like enrollment, completion rates, discipline-related professional outcomes, including placement, employment, licensure, wage outcomes, current and future industry demand, all of these things showing that this is the type of thing that ensures a high return on investment. Institutions now are making decisions based on those criteria and can show that we have de-invested in programs that were poor performing or administrative costs that were not fundamental to the mission of the institution, and have reinvested that back into instruction in programs that provide higher value to students. So the investment in higher education didn't go down, it's just smarter.
Thank you. My time's expired, Mr. Chairman.
Let's take a step back. When Congressman Mark Harris says higher education is failing students, he's tapping into something real. College costs have exploded. Student debt is crushing millions. And not every degree leads to economic mobility. That part isn't controversial. But here's where the debate gets complicated. Harris and other Republicans are arguing that some programs simply shouldn't have access to federal loan money if they can't prove they deliver strong financial outcomes. In other words, if graduates aren't earning more than they would have without the degree, taxpayers shouldn't subsidize it. On the surface, that sounds like accountability. Why should students borrow tens of thousands of dollars for programs that leave them financially worse off? Why should taxpayers back loans that have a high risk of default? But now let's dig deeper. Who decides what counts as value? Is value purely measured in salary? What happens to fields like social work, teaching, public service, the arts, professions that may not generate six-figure incomes but serve critical societal roles? If federal funding becomes tied strictly to earnings metrics, some programs could disappear. And guess who would be hit hardest? Likely smaller colleges, regional institutions, programs that serve first-generation students, students from low-income or minority backgrounds. The very groups the hearing acknowledged are already disproportionately harmed by poor information and misleading financial aid structures. There's an information gap. That's real. Many students don't fully understand the true cost of their degree, the average salary in their chosen field, how loan interest compounds over time. The college scorecard exists, but most 17-year-olds aren't policy analysts. They're navigating a system stacked with marketing, prestige culture, and pressure to just go to college. So yes, transparency matters. Yes, accountability matters. But here's the tension. Are we fixing the system? Or are we narrowing opportunity? Because if loan caps get tighter and funding gets cut, wealthier students can still pay out of pocket. Elite universities will still thrive. The most selective programs will still operate. It's the middle tier and access-focused institutions that feel the squeeze.